What if all you believe about reality were a carefully built lie to keep you stuck? What if the history of Christianity we know was just an edited version, while the real teachings of Jesus were hidden to prevent you from awakening? For this is exactly what an ancient forbidden text, the Apocryphon of John, suggests, that we live in a cosmic simulation, governed by a false god and his manipulative agents. This lost gospel challenges traditional beliefs by revealing a surprising scenario: material reality was not created by a perfect God, but by an imperfect and arrogant being named Yaldabaoth. According to this view, humanity has been locked within a spiritual control system, where organized religions and the very post-life idea only serve our souls trapped. But then, what is the exit? How to escape this cycle of illusion and awaken to the truth? If these questions make your mind a boil of curiosity, get ready. Let us dive into the forbidden gospel that tried to warn us of the spiritual matrix, explore the role of the serpent as liberating, and understand why Jesus, according to this view, came not as a savior of sin, but as a Gnostic messenger of hidden truth. Are you ready to open your eyes? Imagine growing up believing that the world was created by a perfect God, just to find that this reality can be a defective simulation. The Apocryphon of John, a forbidden Gnostic gospel, suggests just that. According to this text, the material universe is not the work of a benevolent God, but of a misleading entity who keeps us trapped. This concept directly challenges the traditional view of Christianity, raising the possibility that we have been programmed to accept illusion as truth. If this seems shocking, think about how well we are conditioned. The educational system, culture, and even organized religions teach us that material reality is all that exists. But what if the truth is hidden, like a password that only few discover? Gnosticism teaches that the only way to escape this cosmic simulation is through gnosis, the hidden spiritual knowledge that allows us to see beyond appearances. It is no coincidence that this gospel has been labeled as heresy. It challenges the control structure itself. The question that remains is, if this view is correct, who would be interested in hiding the truth of us? The Apocryphon of John suggests that there is a force operating behind the scenes, an entity that does not want us to notice the prison we are in. But if there is a jailer, there must also be a key. Is there a way to escape this illusion? In the next passage, we will see how a cosmic error gave rise to a false creator and how it impacts our existence. Most religious traditions teach that God created the universe intentionally and perfectly, but the Apocryphon of John brings a very different story. The creation of the world was a mistake. According to this Gnostic gospel, it all began with Sophia, one of the emanations of the true God, who tried to create something without the consent of the supreme source. The result was catastrophic. A defective being called Yaldabaoth, arrogant and ignorant about his own origin, arose from this reckless act. He then assumed the role of creator and, in his vanity, stated, "I am God, and there is no other than me." But here is the problem: Yaldabaoth was not a true God, just an impostor who created the physical universe as an imperfect copy of divine reality. And to make matters worse, he was not alone. By his side archontes, entities that helped establish a control system to keep human souls trapped. If this resembles a science fiction plot like Matrix, it is no coincidence. Gnostics already spoke of a cosmic simulation long before this idea became popular. The material world, then, would not be a divine blessing, but a spiritual prison designed to keep us blind to the truth. This perspective completely changes the way we see our existence. If the universe was created by a flawed being, then all pains, sufferings, and injustices are not part of a divine plan, but a defective system managed by a false god. But the big question is, if we are stuck, how can we escape? The answer begins to reveal itself when we understand that humanity was not just created, it was imprisoned. In the next passage, we will see how the material world was designed to keep us spiritually captive. If the creation of the world was a mistake, like the Apocryphon of John suggests, then what does this mean to humanity? According to Gnosticism, we do not belong to this world. Within each human being there is a divine spark, a fragment of true reality, but we were locked within a system that keeps us trapped in ignorance. This is the great trap of archontes. They built a universe where souls forget their true nature and now identify with the physical body. In other words, We are living in a spiritual matrix designed to keep us sleeping. Every day we are bombarded with distractions, fear, materialism, social rules that force us to live without question. Organized religions, governments, and even our own biology conspire to keep us trapped in this illusion. Think about it. Why has the search for knowledge been so dangerous? Why were texts like Apocryphon of John forbidden? Because the truth is a threat. If we find out that our true essence does not belong to this world, the control system collapses. Archontes would lose their dominion, for they only rule those who have not yet awakened. But then, is there a way to get out of this prison? Gnosticism teaches that the only real liberation is through gnosis, the deep spiritual knowledge that destroys illusions and reconnects us to the supreme source. But this is not a simple journey, and many who tried to reveal this secret were persecuted and silenced. However, the truth always finds a way of emerging. And curiously, one of the biggest clues for awakening was left in the Bible itself, but in a way that few realized. In the next passage, we will explore one of the most controversial concepts of this forbidden gospel, the true role of the serpent in the tree of knowledge. Since children, we heard that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was the great villain of history. According to the traditional account, she deceived Eve, leading her to disobey God by eating for the forbidden fruit. But what if this interpretation is wrong? The Apocryphon of John has a completely different view. The serpent was not an enemy of humanity, but a liberator. What she offered Adam and Eve was not sin, but knowledge, the lost gnosis that could arouse humanity to her true nature. And who tried to prevent it? Yaldabaoth and his Archontes, who wanted to keep humans in ignorance. The Garden of Eden, from this perspective, was not a paradise, but a golden prison. Adam and Eve were like innocent children, unaware of their true identity. The fruit of the tree of knowledge represented the spark of awakening, something the false gods feared deeply. Thus, the biblical story would have been manipulated to reverse the roles. The true oppressor was passed through God, while the messenger of freedom was demonized. This would explain why so many religions preach blind obedience. They were shaped to keep humans submissive, preventing them from questioning and seeking spiritual knowledge. If this view is correct, it means that primitive Christianity may have been much more radical than we imagine. Perhaps Jesus has not come to reinforce religious dogmas, but to continue the mission of the serpent, bringing to gnosis and challenging the mastery of the archonsers. And isn't it strange that so many spiritual traditions talk about lighting as something that arouses us from a dream? What did they try to hide? In the next passage, we will explore how religious authorities struggled to suppress this knowledge and maintain humanity in darkness. If the Apocryphon of John brought such a revolutionary view about reality, why did almost no one heard of him? Simple, because this knowledge was deliberately suppressed. In the early centuries of Christianity, there was an impressive diversity of beliefs and interpretations about Jesus and his message. But as the early church was consolidated, only one narrative was allowed, and any alternative view was lined with heresy. Gnosticism, with its proposal of direct spiritual liberation, was a threat to the power of religious leaders. Then their gospels were persecuted, destroyed, and forgotten. Think about it. If you wanted to control the pasta, what would be more effective? A system that encourages each person to seek the truth by themselves, or a set of rigid doctrines that require blind obedience? The religious authorities opted for the second way. Gnosticism taught that true salvation did not come from rituals or dogmas, but from the awakening of consciousness. This meant that no one needed intermediaries to connect with the divine, something that would drastically weaken the influence of religious institutions. Thus, texts such as the Apocryphon of John were banned, and the church established a monopoly on truth. But how do we know that? The proof is in the historical records themselves. The early Gnostic Christians were persecuted, their writings were burned, and their followers were labeled as heretics. However, the truth has a habit of surviving. With the discovery of Nag Hammadi's manuscripts in 1945, many of these texts surfaced again, challenging centuries of indoctrination. But what do these writings reveal about the fate of souls? If this world is a prison, what happens after death? In the next passage, we will explore one of the most disturbing ideas of this forbidden gospel: reincarnation, not as a cycle of evolution, but as a system of spiritual imprisonment. Many spiritual traditions teach that reincarnation is a learning process, an evolutionary cycle where souls grow with each life. But what if, in fact, this cycle is a trap? According to the Apocryphon of John, reincarnation is not a path of spiritual progress, but a system of imprisonment created by the archontes. Instead of freeing souls, this process keeps them trapped within cosmic simulation, preventing them from awakening to their true nature. Each new life erases the memories of the previous one, forcing humans to start from scratch, repeating errors and sufferings without realizing that they are being manipulated. If this is true, it means that death does not free us, just throws us back on the game board. According to Gnosticism, when one dies, his soul does not immediately ascend to a higher kingdom. Instead, it goes through a tunnel of light, where entities are passed by gods or angels to convince her to reincarnate. The problem? This choice is an illusion. The soul does not realize that it is being deceived and agrees to return to the material world, perpetuating the cycle of spiritual slavery. It is like an infinite reset that keeps humans under control without realizing what is really happening. But then, is there a way out? According to Gnostic teachings, the only way to escape the wheel of reincarnation is through gnosis, spiritual knowledge that allows the soul to recognize illusion and break free from the cycle. This awakening is not something that can be imposed from outside. It needs to be conquered internally through the search for the truth and the deconstruction of the beliefs imposed by the system. But has anyone tried to alert us about it? Perhaps yes, and his name was Jesus. In the next passage, we will see how the Apocryphon of John portrays Jesus not as a sacrifice to save sinners, but as a cosmic messenger who brought the knowledge that could free us once and for all. The traditional view of Christianity teaches that Jesus came into the world to die for the sins of humanity and redeem us. But the Apocryphon of John presents a very different perspective. Jesus did not come to be a sacrifice, but a cosmic messenger, bringing the knowledge necessary to free humanity from illusion. Instead of preaching obedience to a vengeful God, he taught that the true Creator had nothing to do with Yaldabaoth and the archontes. Its role was not to reinforce the rules of this world, but to reveal its illusory nature and guide the souls back to the supreme source. This idea completely changes the narrative. If Jesus was an enlightened being who came to offer gnosis, then his mission was never about sin and salvation, but about awakening and liberation. In Gnosticism, he appears as someone who challenged religious authorities because he knew they were at the service of the control system. And here comes a curious point: was your crucifixion a way to silence it? Conventional history says he was killed to fulfill a divine plan. But what if his death was just an attempt by the archontes from preventing the truth from being disseminated? If we consider this vision, then the true teaching of Jesus has been distorted over the centuries to transform it into a passive savior rather than a spiritual revolutionary. He did not want us to worship him, but to follow his example and discover the truth for ourselves. But even after death, does the control system still try to manipulate souls? In the next passage, we will explore an even more intriguing concept: the illusion of the afterlife, and how misleading entities may be remaining in this eternal cycle. Many religions teach that, when dying, the soul will be judged and sent to heaven or hell, depending on its actions in life. But what if this narrative is just another piece of illusion? According to the Apocryphon of John, the afterlife is not a final destination, but an extension of spiritual prison. When someone dies, his soul is not released. Instead, he goes through a process where deceiving entities goes through divine gods or beings, convincing her that she needs to correct her mistakes in a new incarnation. The result? The soul returns to the cycle of matter, without realizing that it was manipulated. This would explain why so many people who had quasi-free experiences report being received by heavenly figures who advise them to return. It sounds comforting, but is this second chance really a gift? Or is it just another form of control? For Gnosticism, this recycling of souls is not a blessing, but a system carefully planned to keep consciousness imprisoned in the spiritual matrix. As long as the soul continues to believe in this scam, it will never break the cycle. But then, how to escape? The secret, according to the Gnostics, is to refuse the mistake and retain gnosis at the time of death. Instead of blindly accepting the entities that appear, the soul must question them and reject any attempt to convince. This requires a deep level of consciousness and preparation, as the system was created so that most never realize the trap. But why don't so many religions talk about it? Because, according to Apocryphon of John, religions themselves are part of this control game. In the next passage, we will see how religious institutions were used to keep humanity obedient and distant from the truth. What if religion, instead of being a way to God, were it actually a control tool created by the Arcanes? The Apocryphon of John suggests just that organized religions were not born to free, but to arrest. The idea of a jealous and vengeful God came from Yaldabaoth, the false creator, not from the supreme source. He and his servants have created a system where people's faith is diverted to a being who wants worship, submission, and fear, three perfect ingredients to keep humanity obedient. As long as we are trapped in strict dogmas, we will never seek gnosis, the knowledge that could set us free. Think about the story. How many times have religion been used to justify wars, massacres, and persecution? How many people were burned like heretics simply by questioning the official doctrine? This pattern is not coincidence. If Gnosticism were right, then the true mission of organized religions was never to bring to God, but to prevent us from discovering our direct connection with the divine. They keep the masses occupied with empty rituals, promises of afterlife, rewards, and punishments for those who dare to think differently. Meanwhile, true spiritual wisdom remains hidden. But what about those who perceive the scam? Apocryphon of John teaches that few can see beyond illusion. Most will continue to follow the system, afraid to question what has always been taught to them. However, there is a way out, a path that does not depend on churches, intermediaries, or rules imposed by religious authorities. This path is gnosis, and it is the only key to escaping illusion and recovering our true spiritual identity. In the next passage, we will explore how this liberation happens and why spiritual knowledge is the only weapon against the system that keeps us captive. If all around us physical reality, religions, the promise of a post-life was created as a control system, then how can we escape? Apocryphon of John gives us the answer. The only real liberation comes through gnosis, the direct spiritual knowledge that breaks the illusion. This means that no one can save us, no ritual can rescue us, and no religious doctrine can lead us to the divine. The true key is within each of us. But to find it, we need to unlearn everything we have been taught and begin to question the very nature of reality. The problem is that the system does not want us to discover it. We are trained early on to accept external authority, follow imposed rules, and fear deep questions. But Gnosticism teaches that salvation is not a gift, it is an achievement. To escape the spiritual matrix, we need to recognize that material reality is an illusion, identify the tricks used to keep us trapped, and strengthen our conscience to reject manipulation. Gnosis is not something that can be taught in a church. It needs to be experienced, felt, and lived. And how to start this awakening? The search for hidden knowledge, deep meditation, and the questioning of all imposed beliefs are essential steps. Texts like Nag Hammadi's manuscripts offer us valuable clues, but the journey is individual. What matters is not to follow a new dogma, but to break them all and to recover our spiritual sovereignty. The question that remains is, are you ready to see beyond illusion and seek the truth for yourself? If all we talk about here is true, then the life we know is just a carefully designed illusion to keep us trapped. But now that you have had access to this knowledge, the question that really matters is, what are you going to do with it? Will you continue living as before, following the flow of the system, or will you seek to awaken and discover your true essence? Gnosticism teaches that the truth frees, but first it bothers you. Perhaps this journey is challenging, but it is the only one capable of breaking the invisible shackles that keep us captive. And remember, awakening is a process, not an instant event. Start questioning everything. Research beyond official versions. Read the Gnostic Gospels. Explore the hidden history of Christianity and develop its own connection with the divine. No one can do this for you. Spiritual freedom can only be conquered by those who have the courage to pick it up. But one thing is certain: since you see the truth, there is no way to go back. If this content has made sense to you and opened your mind to new possibilities, then continue this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and share this video, because the more people wake up, the fragile the control system becomes. You are not alone in this search. Let us break this spiritual matrix together and recover what has always been ours by right the freedom of the soul.